They laughed when I walked into that coffee shop, covered in mud, tears streaming down my face. My own family had just thrown me out like trash, but what they didn't know was that in 72 hours, I'd walk back into their lives as a billionaire's wife. Here's how it happened. If you've ever felt worthless, abandoned, or like you don't belong anywhere, this story is for you. Hit that like button if you believe everyone deserves a second chance, and stick around because what happens next will blow your mind. My name is Marion, and 3 days ago I thought my life was over. I was 24, working double shifts at Murphy's Diner just to make ends meet, living with the Henderson family who took me in when I was 16. I thought I had found my place in the world. I was wrong. You see, I wasn't born into the Henderson family. My real parents died in a car crash when I was just a kid, and I bounced around foster homes until Helen and Frank Henderson decided to give me a chance. They already had a daughter, Katie, who was 2 years younger than me. From day one, I knew I was different. I was the outsider, the charity case, the girl who should be grateful for every scrap of kindness thrown her way. But I was grateful. I worked hard in school, helped around the house without being asked, and never complained when Katie got the bigger bedroom or the nicer clothes. I told myself that this was what family looked like and I was lucky to have it. I even had a boyfriend, Jake, who I'd been dating for 2 years. He was sweet, or so I thought, and he made me believe that maybe, just maybe, I was worthy of love. That Tuesday started like any other day. I was working the morning shift at Murphy's when this customer started yelling at me because his eggs were too runny. He called me stupid, worthless, said I'd never amount to anything. Normally, I'd just take it with a smile, but something inside me snapped. I told him that treating people like garbage said more about him than it did about me. My manager fired me on the spot. "We can't have waitresses talking back to customers," he said. Just like that, my job was gone. I walked home in the rain, soaked to the bone, thinking about how I'd explain losing my job to the Hendersons. I had my key ready as I approached the house, but something felt wrong. The front door was unlocked, which was unusual for a Tuesday afternoon. I could hear voices upstairs, and one of them sounded like Jake. My heart started racing as I climbed the stairs, hoping I was wrong about what I might find. But I wasn't wrong. I pushed open the door to Katie's room, and there they were. Jake and Katie tangled up in her pink sheets, looking at me with expressions that weren't even apologetic. They looked annoyed that I'd interrupted them. "Marion," Katie said, not even bothering to cover herself. "You're home early." I couldn't speak. I just stood there dripping rainwater onto her carpet, staring at the two people who were supposed to care about me. Jake sat up, running his hands through his hair like this was just a minor inconvenience. "Look, Marion," he said, "this isn't how I wanted you to find out, but Katie and we've been seeing each other for a while now." "How long?" I whispered. Katie laughed, actually laughed. "6 months. Face it, Marion, you're nothing special. Jake was just using you because he felt sorry for you. But I've got a future. My family has money, connections. You're just the charity case living in our house." Those words hit me harder than any physical blow ever could. I looked at Jake, hoping he'd defend me, tell Katie she was wrong. Instead, he shrugged. "Sorry, Marion, but she's right. You don't really have anything to offer. I mean, you just lost your job, you don't have any family money, and let's be honest, you're not exactly going places. Katie's going to college next year. She's got potential." I felt something inside me break. Not just my heart, but my entire sense of who I thought I was. I turned and ran downstairs, straight into Helen and Frank, who were sitting at the kitchen table with cups of coffee and guilty expressions. "We heard the commotion," Helen said, not meeting my eyes. "Maybe we should talk." "You knew," I said. It wasn't a question. Frank cleared his throat. "We think it might be time for you to find your own place, Marion. You're 24 now, and Katie needs her space. She's got college applications to focus on, and having you here is distracting." Distracting? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I've lived here for 8 years. This is my home. Helen finally looked at me, but her eyes were cold. "This was never really your home, dear. We gave you a place to stay when no one else wanted you. Don't be ungrateful. We could have sent you back to the system when you turned 18. The room started spinning. These people who I thought were my family, who I had loved and served and tried so hard to please, were throwing me away like I was nothing. And the worst part was, they seemed to think they were doing me a favor. "How long do I have?" I asked. "An hour should be enough to pack your things," Frank said. "We don't want this to drag out and make it harder for everyone." An hour. 8 years of my life, and they were giving me an hour. I went upstairs, past Katie's room where I could hear her and Jake laughing, and packed my few belongings into the small suitcase I'd arrived with all those years ago. My savings account had $347 in it, everything I'd managed to save from working at the diner. It wasn't much, but it was all I had. As I walked out of that house for the last time, carrying my suitcase and my broken dreams, I could see the neighbors watching from their windows. Some looked curious, others seemed embarrassed for me. Katie stood in the upstairs window, smirking as she watched me leave. Jake was nowhere to be seen. I walked to the bus station because I didn't know where else to go. I sat on a hard plastic chair, counting my money over and over, trying to figure out how to survive. $347 wouldn't last long, especially not in this town where rent was expensive and jobs were scarce. I called my friend Lucy, but it went straight to voicemail. She was probably at work, living her normal life, completely unaware that mine had just fallen apart. As the hours passed and the bus station emptied out, I felt more alone than I'd ever felt in my entire life. Maybe they were right. Maybe Katie and Jake and the Hendersons were all right about me. Maybe I was nothing special, just a burden that people tolerated out of pity. Maybe I was destined to be alone forever. At 2 in the morning, I found myself at Tony's Diner, a 24-hour place across town. I ordered a cup of coffee I couldn't afford and sat at the counter, trying to figure out what to do next. The place was mostly empty except for a few truckers and an elderly man sitting a few seats away from me. The old man looked distressed, shaking slightly as he stared at his untouched plate of food. Something about him reminded me of my grandfather, who died when I was little. Without really thinking about it, I moved closer to him. "Are you okay?" I asked. He looked at me with confused eyes. I don't feel right. Everything's spinning. I recognized the signs immediately. My grandfather had been diabetic and I'd seen him have episodes like this. "When's the last time you ate something sweet?" I asked. I can't remember. I flagged down the waitress and ordered orange juice, then helped the man drink it slowly. Within a few minutes, his color started returning and his hands stopped shaking. "Are you an angel?" he asked me, and I almost started crying. "No," I said, "just someone who knows what it's like to need help." His name was Harold, and he'd been out walking because he couldn't sleep. He lived with his grandson, but he'd gotten disoriented and ended up at the diner. I helped him call his grandson, and we waited together until the man arrived. When the grandson walked through those diner doors, I thought I was hallucinating. He was tall, probably in his late 20s, with kind eyes and an expensive suit that looked out of place in the dingy diner. But it wasn't his looks or his clothes that struck me. It was the way he looked at his grandfather with such genuine love and concern. "Harold, you scared me to death," he said, embracing the old man. "I woke up and you were gone." "This young lady helped me," Harold said, pointing to me. I think my blood sugar dropped, and she knew exactly what to do. The grandson turned to me, and I felt something I'd never experienced before, like I was being truly seen by another person. "Thank you," he said. "I'm William. And I can't tell you how grateful I am." "It's nothing," I said. "Anyone would have done the same thing." He smiled at that, a sad kind of smile. "You'd be surprised how few people would actually stop to help a stranger." William helped Harold to his feet and started to leave, but then he turned back to me. "I know this might sound strange, but could I get your number? I'd like to properly thank you for what you did tonight." I hesitated. Here was this man who was clearly successful, clearly from a different world than mine, wanting to thank me. Part of me wanted to say no, to tell him that I was nobody special and he didn't owe me anything. But another part of me, the part that had just been through the worst day of my life, decided to take a chance. "I'm Marion," I said, and gave him my number. The next morning, I woke up in a cheap motel room with a text from William asking if I'd like to meet for coffee. I almost didn't respond. What was I supposed to tell him? That I was homeless, heartbroken, and had less than $300 to my name. But something about the way he'd looked at me in that diner made me want to say yes. We met at a small cafe downtown, and I decided to be honest with him. I told him everything, about losing my job, finding Jake and Katie together, being thrown out by the only family I'd known. I expected him to make an excuse and leave, but instead, he listened. Really listened. "I'm sorry," he said when I finished. "No one deserves to be treated like that, especially by people who are supposed to love you." Then he told me his story, how he'd built his tech company from nothing after his parents died in an accident when he was 19, how Harold, his grandfather, was the only family he had left, how success and money had brought him everything except the one thing he wanted most, genuine connection with another person. "Do you know how many people I meet who only see dollar signs when they look at me?" he said. "But last night, you saw someone who needed help, and you helped him. No questions, no expectations. That's incredibly rare. We talked for hours, about dreams, about loss, about what it means to find your place in the world. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was talking to someone who truly understood me. Not the charity case or the grateful foster kid, but me, Marion." When I mentioned that I was staying at the motel, William's expression grew concerned. "That place isn't safe," he said. "Let me get you a room at the Marriott downtown. It's not charity," he added quickly when he saw me start to protest. "I want to spend more time getting to know you, and I can't do that if I'm worried about your safety." That night, in a beautiful hotel room that probably cost more than I made in a month, I stared at myself in the mirror and wondered if I was dreaming. This man, this successful, kind, genuine man, wanted to spend time with me. Not because he felt sorry for me, but because he actually enjoyed my company. The next 2 days felt like a fairy tale. William showed me parts of the city I'd never seen, took me to museums and parks, bought me meals at restaurants I'd only ever walked past. But more than that, he talked to me like I mattered. He asked about my dreams, my opinions, my thoughts on everything from art to business to life itself. On the second evening, as we walked along the waterfront watching the sunset, he stopped and took my hands. "Marion," he said, "I know this is going to sound crazy, but I've never met anyone like you. You're kind without expecting anything in return. You're strong even when the world has tried to break you, and you see good in people even after you've been hurt. I've spent my whole adult life building a company, accumulating wealth, achieving success, and none of it has made me as happy as these past 2 days with you." I could barely breathe. "William, I don't understand what you're trying to say." He got down on one knee right there on the waterfront and pulled out a small velvet box. "I'm saying I love you, Marion. I'm saying I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I'm saying, will you marry me?" I stared at him, this incredible man kneeling in front of me, and for a moment I couldn't speak. 3 days ago I thought I was nothing. I thought I was worthless, unwanted, destined to be alone. And now here was someone who saw me, really saw me, and wanted to build a life with me. "Yes," I whispered, and then louder, "Yes, of course, yes." The next morning, we went to City Hall and got married in a simple ceremony with Harold as our witness. I wore a beautiful white dress that William had bought for me, and for the first time in my entire life, I felt beautiful. Not because of the dress or the makeup or the ring on my finger, but because someone loved me exactly as I was. But as happy as I was, I knew I needed closure. I needed to face the people who had thrown me away and show them, not for revenge, but for my own peace of mind, that I was worth more than they had believed. "I want to go back," I told William. "I want them to see who I really am." He understood immediately. "Then we'll go back," he said. "Together." That afternoon, we drove up to Morrison's coffee shop in Williams Bentley. It was the same place where I used to meet Jake sometimes, where the Henderson family went for Sunday brunch. I knew they'd be there. Katie had posted on social media about her coffee date with Jake, and Helen always brought Frank there on Wednesdays. I wore a simple but elegant cream-colored dress and felt more confident than I ever had in my life. Not because of the expensive clothes or the luxury car, but because I finally knew my worth. I finally understood that I had always been enough. Other people just hadn't been able to see it. When we walked into that coffee shop, the reaction was immediate. Jake nearly choked on his drink. Katie's mouth fell open. Helen and Frank, who were sitting at a corner table, went completely silent. "Marion," Katie stammered, "what are you doing here? And whose car is that outside?" William took my hand and smiled warmly at everyone. His presence commanded respect, not in an arrogant way, but in the way that truly successful, confident people naturally do. "Oh my goodness," Helen said, recognition dawning on her face. "You're William Stone, aren't you? The tech entrepreneur? I've seen you on the news." "Marion," Jake said, still staring. What's going on?" I looked at all of them, these people who had made me feel small, worthless, unwanted, and I felt nothing but pity for them. They were still sitting in the same coffee shop, having the same petty conversations, while I had discovered love, purpose, and my own strength. "I came to thank you," I said calmly. "All of you." "Thank us?" Frank said, confused. "Yes, you showed me exactly what I was worth to you, and because of that, I was able to discover what I'm actually worth. Jake, you taught me that I deserve someone who sees my value, not someone who settles for me out of convenience. Katie, you helped me realize that real beauty comes from kindness, not from tearing others down. Helen, Frank, you showed me the difference between a house and a home." I placed the keys to their house on the table in front of them. "I release you from any obligation you might have felt toward me. I found my real family." William squeezed my hand supportively. "We should go," he said gently. "We have a honeymoon to plan." As we turned to leave, Helen called out, "Marion, wait!" "There's been a misunderstanding. We never meant for you to leave permanently. You're family to us." I turned back one last time. "No," I said. "Family doesn't throw each other away when things get inconvenient. Family doesn't make each other feel worthless. You gave me shelter for 8 years, and I'm grateful for that. But you never gave me what I needed most, the feeling that I belonged." Jake stood up suddenly. "Marion, I made a mistake. Katie and I, we're not serious. I was just confused. Can we talk?" I looked at this man who had betrayed me, who had made me feel like I wasn't enough, and I felt nothing but indifference. "Jake, I hope you and Katie find happiness together. You deserve each other." As we walked out of that coffee shop hand in hand, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders that I'd been carrying my entire life. I wasn't the abandoned little girl anymore. I wasn't the grateful foster child. I wasn't the girl who had to earn love by being perfect. I was Marion Stone, beloved wife, cherished daughter-in-law to Harold, and most importantly, a woman who finally knew her own worth. That evening, as William and I sat on the balcony of our hotel suite planning our future together, I realized something profound. My story wasn't about revenge or proving people wrong. It was about discovering that the love I'd been searching for my entire life had to start with loving myself. 3 days earlier, I thought my life was over. But it wasn't over. It was just beginning. Because sometimes, when everything falls apart, it's actually falling into place. If this story touched your heart, smash that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Your worth isn't determined by how others treat you. It's determined by how you treat yourself. Subscribe for more incredible comeback stories, and remember, your greatest revenge is your own happiness. What's your comeback story? Tell me in the comments below.